I gave up my voice so my daughter could sing. For 18 years, I carried a silence that choked me just so she could be the pride of this village. But today, they call her a witch. The spirit of the river gave her to me, but it warned. She must never weep a tear of blood, or the river will claim what it lent. Now, look at the village square. My young girl is tied to a wooden stake while the elders shout for blood. Suddenly, the sky turns dark. The wind howls, and her eyes change to a terrifying crimson red. The air is thick with the smell of red dust kicked up by angry feet. The heavy, aggressive thumping of the village iron gong, the gabedu, shakes the ground under the burning harmattan sun. I am pushing through this hostile crowd. My name is Idara. I cannot speak a single word, but my frantic gestures and the raw panic in my eyes show my deep agony. I am a desperate mother watching her world fall apart. To understand why a mother's silence is about to tear this village completely apart, we must go back to the night the music died in Ilu Oloyan. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful people. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from today, whether you are in London, Houston, or Lagos. Now, sit tight, because this is exactly how the tragedy began.
Long before the silence took over, my voice was the heartbeat of Ilu Oloyin. Whenever I sang at the New Yam festivals, the villagers would stop and listen, mesmerized by the sweet melodies that seemed to heal the weary. I was the town's most celebrated traditional singer, and life felt full of promise. But then, a cruel and mysterious illness swept through our home like a thief in the night. It completely stripped away my voice, leaving me trapped in a quiet world. Worse still, the tragedy did not stop there. Over the next few years, the illness took the lives of 3 of my beautiful babies while they were still in their infancy. Each time a child closed their eyes forever, a piece of my soul died with them. The silence inside our small mud-walled home became heavy and suffocating. My husband, broken by deep grief and the unnatural quietness of our house, could no longer bear to look at me or the empty wooden crib sitting in the corner. To escape the pain, he would wake up long before dawn and slip away to the farm while it was still dark. He would toil under the hot sun all day and return only after the moon had risen high in the night sky. When we were in the same room, he avoided my eyes, completely swallowed by his own silent sadness. We were like 2 ghosts living under the same roof, drifting apart because our shared heartbreak was too heavy to carry. Outside our walls, the village grew cold and hostile. The elders began to whisper in the shadows, claiming that my womb was cursed by angry ancestors. Whenever I walked down the narrow dirt paths to the market, women would quickly pull their children away and cover their little faces, as if my misfortune was a contagious disease.
The cruel isolation pushed me to my absolute breaking point. I was completely alone, drowning in tears I could not speak about. In that dark place of utter desperation, I realized I could no longer just sit and wait for death to take what was left of my life. I had to act, even if it meant seeking a forbidden and dangerous cure. When midnight arrived and wrapped the world in complete darkness, I slipped out of my quiet home. I began my lonely trek into the forbidden Asasi forest, a place the villagers spoke about only in frightened whispers. The air beneath the tangled trees was thick and heavy, smelling strongly of rotting leaves, damp earth, and ancient secrets. Shadows stretched out like long arms, and the eerie hoots of night birds echoed through the branches. I chose to walk barefoot, wanting to connect directly with the ground, but the forest floor was unforgiving. Sharp thorns and jagged stones sliced into the soles of my feet with every step, leaving a trail of blood behind me. The physical pain was intense, but it was nothing compared to the agony in my heart, so I did not stop. Desperation drove me forward through the blinding dark. Eventually, the thick trees opened up, and I arrived at the edge of the shrine creek. The water was pitch black and perfectly still, gleaming like polished stone under the faint moonlight. This was a cursed threshold where even the bravest hunters refused to go, fearing the powerful spirits said to guard its depths. But I had no fear left inside me. Without hesitating, I stepped into the chilly stream, ignoring the cold shock that raced up my legs.
I waded deeper and deeper until the murky water rose all the way up to my waist. Standing there in the absolute silence, I unclasped the precious coral beads that once belonged to my late mother, my last remaining treasure on this earth. With trembling hands, I dropped the beads into the dark water, offering my most valuable possession to the unseen forces below, waiting for the water to answer my sacrifice. For a long moment, nothing happened, and the silence stretched out over the creek. Then, without a single gust of wind, the black water began to ripple violently, bubbling and churning around my waist. From the center of the deep pool, a towering figure slowly rose into the night air. It was a magnificent and terrifying creature made entirely of swirling white mist and tangled water lilies. I knelt down right there in the chilly water, my body shaking, as I pointed first to my scarred throat and then to my empty, aching womb. The entity looked down at me, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like a roaring waterfall crashing against heavy rocks. It said, "I will give you a daughter whose voice will heal the broken. But remember, she belongs to the river. The day she sheds a tear of blood, our bargain is broken." I did not stop to think about the heavy cost or what a tear of blood could possibly mean. Blinded by my deep desire to be a mother, I nodded my head frantically in agreement. Satisfied with my choice, the towering water spirit suddenly collapsed back into the creek, vanishing without a trace and leaving the surface perfectly calm once again. As I turned and slowly stepped out of the muddy water onto the riverbank, a sudden rush of intense emotion washed over me. I opened my mouth and tried to scream in pure relief, wanting to fill the dark forest with a shout of joy. But absolutely no sound came out. My voice was completely gone, locked away by the spirit forever. But as I placed my hands over my stomach, I felt an instant, comforting warmth spreading deep inside my belly, a certain sign that the magical bargain had already worked. Exactly 9 months after that terrifying night at the creek, a beautiful baby girl arrived, and we named her Adana. By the time she reached 10 years old, her voice had become a literal miracle for our entire community. When Adana sang, her sweet words were so powerful that they could instantly heal the sick, and the dried-up village crops began to flourish and grow abundantly. Seeing these incredible blessings, the villagers completely forgot their old malice and bad whispers, transforming their fear into pure worship for my young daughter. However, Adana carried a strange trait that constantly reminded me of her supernatural origin. Her eyes were not dark like ours, but an unnatural, piercing amber color that seemed to glow in the shade. Furthermore, she absolutely refused to go anywhere near cooking fires or hot oil, crying out that the intense heat burned her very spirit. To protect her from the dangerous rule of the bargain, I began to take extreme measures to isolate Adana from the rest of the world. I never allowed my daughter to cut onions or do anything that might accidentally make her eyes water. I handled every single bit of the household cooking myself, sweating over the hot open flames while keeping her far away from the kitchen hearth. I fiercely shielded her from any form of sadness, disappointment, or physical pain, constantly watching her every step to ensure she never shed a single tear. This constant vigilance meant we had to live a very lonely life, separated from the normal routines of the village, but I was willing to do whatever it took to keep her safe and dry. The years passed by like quick snapshots in a dream.
Adana grew from a gifted child into a breathtaking 18-year-old maiden, her beauty and grace captivating everyone who saw her. Her heavenly voice became the anchor for every single festival in Ilu Oloyin, and the villagers could not imagine a celebration without her songs. But as her fame grew, a dark shadow began to form in the corner of our lives. Enter Oma, a bitter local woman whose heart was eaten away by deep jealousy. Oma's own daughter had been passed over by the village chief's son, who had eyes only for Adana. Filled with malice, Oma began sneaking around and spying on our compound, watching our daily lives from behind the thick bushes. It did not take her long to notice that something was unusual. Adana never helped with the hearth, never gathered firewood, and never touched a cooking pot. Oma decided to create a wicked trap to expose our secret. One afternoon, as the village women gathered to prepare for a big feast, Oma waited until Adana walked past a giant iron pot of boiling palm oil. With a swift, hidden movement, Oma extended her foot to trip my daughter, hoping the hot oil would splash and burn her.
But a mother's instincts are faster than any malicious plot. Seeing the danger, I lunged forward with all my might and dove into the space between Adana and the pot. The scalding oil splashed heavily across my own arms and back, causing an agonizing pain that made me scream silently in my mind. But my mission was successful. Adana remained untouched and unharmed, keeping her far away from the sorrow of tears. After that narrow escape, I nursed my painful burns in secret, feeling a false sense of safety. I truly believed that my constant vigilance and willingness to suffer would always be enough to shield my daughter from the world's cruelty. As Adana's beauty blossomed, love found its way into her life in the form of Chidi, the honorable and kind son of our village chief. Chidi was different from the other young men. He fell deeply in love with Adana not just for her heavenly singing voice, but for her exceptionally gentle and caring spirit. Whenever the bitter whispers of jealous villagers like Oma rose up in the shadows, Chidi stood up like a sturdy shield, fiercely defending Adana against the malicious gossip. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, forming a beautiful connection built on mutual respect and protection. Watching them smile at each other brought a rare warmth to my heart, but it also brought a cold, creeping fear. I knew that true love demands total honesty, and our secret was a fragile glass ornament that could shatter at any moment. The true danger arrived when Chidi officially proposed a traditional wedding to unite their lives forever. While the entire village rejoiced at the news, my heart sank into deep panic because of our sacred customs. According to ancient tradition, Adana would be required to perform the Igban Ku, the wine-carrying ceremony, to prove she was ready to be a wife.
This sacred ritual meant she would have to kneel before all the stern village elders, and worst of all, cook a symbolic meal for her new husband over a blazing open fire. This was the exact thing I had strictly forbidden for 18 years to keep her safe from the spirit's curse. I was trapped in a terrible nightmare, forced to find a way to protect both my daughter's romantic happiness and the dangerous rule of the river bargain at the exact same time. Oma did not waste any time acting on her bitter malice. Seeing how close the wedding was, she took her toxic suspicions straight to the village elders and to Chidi's powerful father. With a sharp and venomous tongue, she claimed that Adana was not a normal human girl at all. Oma told them that my daughter was an Okbanje, a wicked spirit child, or a witch who was using a dark supernatural charm to bewitch Chidi into loving her. Her words were like dry wood thrown onto a hidden fire, spreading fear and worry through the hearts of the community leaders. The village elders, terrified of spiritual corruption, quickly called for a harsh confrontation to settle the matter. They demanded a public trial by ordeal to test Adana's true spirit. Adana would be forced to stand before the entire village and hold the sacred Ofo staff of the ancestors. If she was indeed a witch, the ancient spirits would instantly strike her down with a curse. The night before the terrifying public trial, a heavy and dreadful silence hung over the entire community. Inside his father's compound, Chidi stood completely alone in the cool night air, staring down at the beautiful coral wedding beads he had proudly bought for Adana. His heart was a chaotic battlefield, deeply torn between two powerful forces.
On one side was his profound, pure love for the gentle girl who had carefully planted in his mind. He wanted to trust his heart, but the ancient laws of the village weighed heavily on his shoulders. In that agonizing, long pause before the dawn, nobody moved and nobody spoke. The dread was absolute as the hours ticked away toward the judgment that would change all of our lives forever. The morning sun rose like a blazing eye as the entire village gathered in the crowded marketplace. A heavy, suffocating heat hung in the air, while Adana was forced to step forward and grasp the heavy, ancient Ofo staff. Her hands trembled against the dark wood, her amber eyes wide with innocence. Before the ancestors could even make a sign, Oma stepped out from the crowd with a face twisted by pure hatred. With an aggressive swing, she slapped Adana heavily across the face, her voice piercing the air as she screamed, "Confess, you wicked witch!" The sudden physical pain and the overwhelming emotional shock completely broke my poor daughter's spirit. For 18 years I had kept her safe from sorrow, but now the dam had burst. Adana began to weep uncontrollably, but as the fluid ran down her pale cheeks, the crowd gasped in absolute horror. The tears flowing from her eyes were not clear, normal water. They were thick, bright crimson blood.
The marketplace erupted into total chaos. The villagers screamed in terror, waving their fists and loudly calling for her immediate execution. But before a single angry hand could touch her, the dry earth beneath Adana's feet split wide open. A massive, roaring deluge of water erupted upward, bursting from the ground like a fountain. A fierce whirlwind of river water completely enveloped her, shielding her from the hostile crowd and spinning into a blinding vortex. When the rushing water finally cleared and settled, Adana was gone. In the exact spot where she had stood, a beautiful, crystal-clear stream now flowed gently, cutting right through the center of the dusty marketplace. Oma was left completely paralyzed with terror, staring at the water with wide, unblinking eyes, realizing the gravity of her cruelty. Nearby, Chidi fell to his knees, utterly broken-hearted, clutching a single wet coral bead that his beautiful bride had left behind in the mud. The circle was now complete. I stood by the edge of the new, bubbling stream, completely alone in the world, stripped of the only joy I had ever known. They gathered to judge a witch, but they only succeeded in drying up the only beautiful melody this village would ever know. And now I am left with my heavy silence, spending my days listening to the gentle river hum my beloved daughter's song.